Transportation Committee for August 28th, 2023. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. If there's no changes or additions, we can proceed. All right, seeing none, we're moving to approval of the August 14th, 2023 Transportation Committee meeting minutes. Did anyone have changes or additions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Morales, second by Councilmember Chambliss. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Now I'm going to turn it to Metro Transit General Manager Canderas for employee recognition.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the committee, today we're pleased to recognize someone who regularly goes above and beyond to help keep our public facilities clean. From keeping our shelters and stations clean daily to making site improvements to supporting art installations, you'll hear all about how important this often unseen and unappreciated work is. So with that, I'm going to invite up Ku Zhang, our Public Facilities Supervisor, to introduce our awardee today.
Hello, Madam Chair and the council members. I would like to introduce Leicester. My name is Ku Zhang with Public Facilities. So, as the Public Facilities Department continues to improve the appearance and upkeep of our transit centers and stations, we count on the lead public facility worker, Leicester Holloway here, is worthy of praise for his work. It doesn't go unnoticed because he's a game changer now, for us. At the forefront of major projects, Leicester has received a lot of positive feedback from customers and colleagues. Since becoming a lead in July, right? It was July.
Yeah, July.
Leicester has helped with training, onboarding. Right now, he's doing is helping us doing the training matrix.
Yeah.
Is what I would call it for our facilities staff. He has taken ownership of his duties and takes pride in his work, and he trusts his abilities, and I like that about Leicester. Leicester has been a major factor in the success of the Metro Orange line that just opened. The upkeep of the station, including improvements to the stairwells at Kingsfield 35E, where it's now safer and cleaner to maintain. Leicester's work is appreciated by Mark Granlund, the Public Arts Administrator, for his work on the mural project under the bridge there, where he made sure the artists felt supported, safe, and able to focus on their responsibilities. And then also Christina Morrison, the Principal Project Coordinator, also appreciates his work. He takes ownership and care for the facilities at a very high standard under extremely challenging conditions, And then ever since Leicester has joined public facilities, it's like a breath of fresh air for us and he's an asset to Metro Transit. His sense of humor, he's fun to work with. His colleagues love him. Great work ethics, leaves no stone unturned. Metro Transit is glad to have someone like Leicester on our team. So thank you, Leicester.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And we all want to thank you. We do know how hard the work is, and we know that when we go to the different stations and we see things, and we do see the difference being made right now, and I want to just relay to you that we notice a difference too, and it's because of people like you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have anything to say?
Well, I appreciate the award, but I believe in team. So it's a lot of people that help me perform things. Some days I might get on their nerves, some days I don't. But there's a lot of people who help me get to this point to elevate. They encourage me and everything else. So I would like to say thank you to all of them. But I believe in team, and there's no I in team. And I can only wish that everybody in my department get it, because there's a lot of people out there that do things that nobody ever sees and talks about. I'm just a little bit more vocal. The orange line is basically my line. 35 and Lake is my building. But there's been other routes where you might think it's the blue line, but it was always Deb's line and
Yeah.
different parts of the routes. We call them by those people's names because they've been on those routes and they take
Yeah.
pride in their work. And
Take ownership of routes.
that's a very important thing. I mean, I learned from a lot of them, so I say thank you, but it's actually a team effort.
Thank you for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, and do tell your teams, thank you.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I ride the orange line, I'm from the South Metro, so.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
Hey, no problem.
Nice.
All right, on to reports. Our first report is MTS Services Director Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. Two notes. Quick note is that I attended the Highway 610 groundbreaking event with Councilmember Johnson last week. So this phase of Highway 610 is really completing the local connections that fulfill a 50-year in the making vision to provide that freeway across town. So a major piece of our transportation system that is coming to completion in part through a $7 million regional solicitation grant. But at the groundbreaking, Councilmember Johnson spoke, as did Governor Walz, both senators, Klobuchar and Smith, and a number of other officials representing the region. So it was a good event. We have a number of items tonight related to the MTS planning role. I also have an update about MTS contracted services, particularly our Metro Mobility Premium On-Demand service. So I'll give you a few updates on this program. One provision of the 2023 state transportation bill is to conduct a pilot program for enhanced service availability for the Metro Mobility Premium On-Demand taxi service. Now that's a service option different from sort of base Metro Mobility, but Metro Mobility customers can pay the first $5 of a taxi fare through our vendor. The council would then pay the next 15, and then the customer would be responsible for the amounts above that. It's a service that about 40,000 customers used last year. One constraint on it is that the hours of service have matched the Metro Mobility hours in each community. Through the pilot program, we're actually, the change is expanding the hours that the service is available to be consistent across the region and to do that on an extended basis. So the expanded hours will be on weekdays from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., on Saturdays from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Sundays from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Also, starting September 1st, because the $15 fare subsidy that we offer has been in place for many years, actually for 10 years, since 2013, starting September 1st, we're going to pay up to $20 of the fare instead of the current 15, so an additional subsidy as well. However, the typical fare is actually less than $12 that we provide, so many customers do not go above 15 now. So this expansion is happening on a short timeline. We found out about it in May, and like many other Metro Transit programs that are quickly being implemented, this is in that category as well. We actually negotiated a contract amendment for the service with our existing service provider, Transportation Plus, to expand the service hours and to extend the original contract through the pilot period. So that would be through December 31st of 2025. That's defined in law. So we'll be rolling out this program. As I said, about 40,000 riders used this program last year. We're on track for about 60,000 this year, so it's actually grown quite a bit. We have 29,000 through June of 2023. We will be communicating this to customers, so we'll be sharing it on the Metro Mobility website, and it'll be a feature story in an upcoming newsletter that is sent to Metro Mobility customers in September. It's not the end of this expansion program. We're actually planning to release an RFP for our next premium on-demand service this fall in hopes of providing additional options as well. So We had a RFP in the past for a on-demand service option for Metro Mobility. It included discussion and negotiations with Lyft that ultimately were unsuccessful and did not result in an executed contract. But we will be looking at those options again this fall as we roll out a new RFP, while also making this new service available starting on September 1st. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for that update. The last piece where you're talking about looking at ways that we can expand the service through the RFP, like through the Lyft. Are there any other options for us to be able to expand the hours and the consistency? What is the strategy for the expansion?
Yeah, great question, Councilmember Chambliss. Madam Chair, the near-term option for us is with our existing vendor, and so working with them, they're able to expand the hours of service that are provided across each community. Different types of service may be possible through this competitive proposal process that we're planning to embark on this fall.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? All right, then we'll turn to Metro Transit General Manager Kinder.
Chair Barber, council members, a couple seasonal updates for you. First off, as you're well aware, the Minnesota State Fair started last Thursday, and just want to acknowledge all the work from Metro Transit employees who are out there supporting our park and ride sites, the service we have out there on the Route 3 and Metro A-Line that serves the fairgrounds well as we have presence at the grandstand booth and participate in the Eco Experience building. So there's a lot of employees out there putting a lot of effort into representing Metro Transit well. And we don't have any official ridership data yet, but it does appear that ridership at our park and ride sites is up. And also we added a fourth site this year, which is contributing to additional ridership as well so far. In addition to the state fair, that means it's also time for school to come back into session. And just will note that we continue to partner with Minneapolis and St. Paul public high schools to provide student passes and service to their schools. For Minneapolis, we continue to provide student passes and service for all the major Minneapolis public high schools. In St. Paul, just last week, they announced they're shifting up some of their high schools back to yellow bus service. For those of you who are here in 2021, I believe it was, a school bus workforce shortage led them to partner with us to provide additional service for their students. Because as their workforce has rebounded somewhat, they're shifting some schools back to yellow bus. So we won't be providing the same student pass service to as many schools as we did previously, but still are working closely with St. Paul schools on the schools that remain part of the student pass program, and look forward to serving all students as they come back to school in the coming week. So with that, I take any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I have one question on the St. Paul. Are we working with the school district for maybe some of those students at the schools who are used to having the student pass? Because you could use it outside of school hours.
Yes, Madam Chair, committee members, my understanding is we are continuing to partner closely with the school district, making sure students' families are aware of other pass options, where appropriate, making information available about the transit assistance program and so forth. So our partnership with St. Paul is still there, and certainly look forward to continuing to serve students. Want that, yeah.
Very good, thank you. And just relay all of our thanks for the State Fair service. And I will do a little side shout out to Southwest Transit, who gave me a lovely ride to the fair on Sunday. So, all right, if there's no other questions, let's go next to our tab liaison, Mr. Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, council members, Mr. Carlson, General Manager Canderas, and Deputy Director Benowitz is here. Boy, before I turn it over to the Steve Peterson show, I mean, he's got a lot this afternoon. And you have a full agenda. I'm just going to bring up two items that were discussed at TAB and are not on the summary report that Elaine prepared for you. The first is the RBTN, the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network, which was formed in 2015 as part of the 2040 Transportation Policy Plan. The map was solidified, I guess is the word, Charles, please correct me if I'm wrong. It was put in place for the regional solicitation with a few minor adjustments, mostly alignments and extensions of the bike ways. And the other item is a scope change request for the upcoming BRT E line, E as in Edward, and the city of Minneapolis, the funding for this was through the Highway Safety Improvement Program, the HSIP, and the city of Minneapolis requested that one intersection be removed, and the purpose of this is because this intersection will be a platform for the BRT, a station platform, and Minneapolis felt it was better to do it all at once when the E line is constructed. And the city of Minneapolis is going to locally fund this, and this is allowed, or the TAB or the council policy, to allow the city to keep its full federal funding, even though it's dropping 25% of one of the four intersections, because the policy has been, or is, that when another agency steps into the project, when the funds, with the funds, then they can keep the federal funds. And the other part is, so you know, the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, those are the real smart people, the engineers and all those, they're the real smart people. I don't. Anyways, there was funding and programming is going to get together a work group on scope change policy, which we just talked about in the E-line, and then the program year policy, which we have discussed here before, and you know there's some events with that. And we have, prior to the TAB meeting on the Monday, prior to the TAB meeting at 12 o'clock, we have a citizens briefing session, if you will, that's put on by Joe and Steve and Ms. Fenowitz. And thank you, Chair Barber and Vice Chair Chambers, for attending. And if any of you all would like to do so, we'd love to have you. And lastly, you're going to have a great information item in number 2. Ms. Rotten is here to present the transportation system performance evaluation. And that is, we had it at TAB, and it's really fascinating. Thank you, Madam Chair. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Dugan?
Oh,
Councilmember
of course,
Chambliss.
ma'am.
just one question. I'm not sure if you know which intersection is being changed to.
It's the
station?
Sheridan, I'm sorry, ma'am. It's the Upton Avenue South and Sheridan Avenue South and 43rd Street intersection.
Okay.
I have it if you'd like me to give this to you. This is the.
Oh, if you have an extra copy later, you can.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I may have to leave early. I have a church obligation tonight, you know.
No problem. Any additional questions or comments? All right, thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very good. Oh, yeah, sorry, Councilmember Pacheco.
I haven't been that's part of my neighborhood, but it was part of my district before, but that Upton and 44th, that section there was, went through a lot, and the neighborhoods are deciding, it's right next to Martina's and right next to, so it's a very active little center, and I appreciate going out there a few times with staff to make sure we were presenting well in the community, and they've had a number of meetings there. It's half the people are happy and half, so maybe we arrived at the right place, but it's a good spot, actually.
Okay, great. That's good to hear.
Oh, very good, thank you. All right, additional questions or comments? All right, then moving on, there's no items on consent tonight, so we're going straight into business. The first item is business item 2023-197, which is the Transit Service Intervention Project, and we have Celina, Martina here to present. Oh, and Jody Jacoby.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Celina Martina, Senior Manager of Equity and Inclusion at Metro Transit. Nice to be here with you, and I'm here with Jody Jacoby, Director of Procurement, to present the first business item of tonight's meeting. Seeking your authorization to award and execute contracts 23 letter P 116 letter A through E, that will help advance the Transit Service Intervention Project and goals. Jody will give you a little bit of background and more information about these business items, and I'm happy to be here finally today with this item.
Madam Chair, committee members, I'm here just to talk a little bit about the procurement process. As you're aware, the legislature awarded the council the funds at the end of May, and we needed to get up and running quickly. And so we really took a new collaborative approach with this project. And we issued a pre-solicitation notice on June 5th, which generated a lot of interest and allowed some of the community partners and vendors that we hadn't identified to be aware of this notice and then sign up when it was ready for completion. And there were quite a few vendors that were identified by the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, and also the Homeless Action Team and the Metro Transit Police Department. The advertisement then was prepared and sent out to the 1,200 vendors that we have on our contracting opportunities page. We also collaborated with Hennepin County and their procurement department, and they pushed it out to all of their vendors. Again, the Homeless Action Team gave us a list. It was published in the Wire, and also Metro Transit created an advertisement for it. This project was a little bit different because we knew we needed to, again, get proposals in place quickly so we could review and get the service moving forward. So instead of a traditional request for proposal with a very comprehensive process, we issued a request for declaration. We posted it on our traditional bidding and proposal site, but we used Microsoft Forms. And so the vendors were able to quickly fill out the information. There was no fee to download, and it was accessible on multiple platforms, including phones and tablets and computers. So it was a very easy, fillable form, which we believe gave us a lot of, it allowed a lot of inclusivity for vendors of any size and a lot of ease to complete. We received 30 proposals, and during July and August, the evaluation panel reviewed and ranked them, and that's the recommendation that you have before you today for the first series of the work. And I'll transition it back to Celina.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. And I think that is the first series because we are doing that in 2 phases. So we are coming before you with the first phase and the proposal of 5 contracts with the organizations listed in your business item. And the amount, the total contract amount is a little bit over $766,000 of the $2 million that was appropriated by the legislation. And we will be coming back to this committee and the council to seek approval for further disbursement of funds. Since the committee will continue to review the proposals, the first phase of the review focus on organizations that do direct on-site services, mental health services, homelessness prevention, housing stability, and substance use disorder on our system, on the blue and the green line. This is the Transit Service Intervention Project, only focus on LRT. And we focus on those contracts first. We are hoping to come back to you soon on the second phase with the proposals and declaration of interest that address the engagement, outreach, referrals, screenings, et cetera. That is also part of the criteria for these awards. We are, like I said, very excited because we launched our Transit Service Intervention Project early in June. We are coordinating with Hennepin County, Ramsey County, the state of Minnesota, with different departments of human services, law enforcement agencies, and we meet on a bi-weekly basis, and we are really eager to work in partnership with these organizations on the contracts to evaluate and continue to monitor the impact on those key areas. So I'm here to answer any questions you have about these or the project overall.
Very good. Councilmember Venta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. This proposed action is great, and I really appreciate that the legislature did this and that we've been given the responsibility of following through on it. I don't know a lot about these organizations. I appreciate the background information, but I'm hoping that either in this round or in the second round, we do what we can to check out possible organizations that can also assist with seniors who are experiencing homelessness. Don't recall seeing recent numbers here in the metro region, but I've read that throughout the country that the increase in the number of homeless elders is becoming a significant factor, that housing stability is really of concern. So that would be one request I would have, if there are organizations available to do that. And just the other point I want to make is I know that council member Tony Carter attended a meeting a couple weeks ago, I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, maybe tonight, at Union Station regarding concerns about residents in the lower town area of St. Paul. And I know that both for the lower town area as well as the area around West 7th, the old Mickey's Diner neighborhood, there are a lot of concerns about the increasing numbers of homeless and then the predators that come along with it, as well as the illnesses that surface in a number of ways. So I know that for Ramsey County, but particularly for downtown St. Paul, this is really important. So thank you again.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you. I'm really glad that the legislation also, offered money for a problem that we've known about for many years and has gotten worse with the pandemic. And it's good that Met Council is also a part of servicing and supporting these organizations. So I know Phase 2 is going to outreach beyond the lines. Is that what I'm hearing? Or no?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss. No, the Transit Service Intervention Project is very specific to the blue and the green line, so it's only light rail. What Phase 2 contracts will be is in addition, providing similar services. Actually, we received 30 proposals, so it was a very thorough evaluation that is ongoing and very iterative. These 5 contracts that we presented before you are providing direct services on site. They can do mental health services, substance abuse prevention on site. We'll continue to review the additional declaration of interest to seek if they meet that criteria, but they also offer outreach, engagement that was named in the legislation as potential services that we want to provide. Jody, you want?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, and this is definitely unique to seeing two-phase, but we know how important it is to get these contracts in place quickly. And so this two-phased approach was really for expediency. The cumulative value of these contracts are over $500,000, which means it's in your signature authority to approve. And that's why they're broken into the 2 phases, really in a matter to get the signature authority approval, to get these contracts underway with the expectation that the next phase that weren't quite through evaluation will be coming soon. And then they can be executed and put into place.
Okay, remaining contract evaluations?
Yes.
Okay. One more
Councilmember
question.
Chambliss and then Pacheco.
Okay, so I'm wondering, do we plan to spend through the $2 million in Phase 2? And then how long would that stretch? And I noticed that you mentioned evaluation, like this is kind of like a pilot, so if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so the $2 million is for the entirety of the project. So it includes Phase 1 and Phase 2, which is contracts with social services organizations as well as law enforcement agencies that provide increased visibility and services on our trains and platforms. We are working on Phase 2 contracts, so Metro Transit Police Department is working with other law enforcement agencies to understand their capacity. One of the challenges is the law enforcement agencies in the region have the same constraints as we do in terms of having capacity to add officers on our platforms and on the light rail. So that is still being pursued and evaluated in terms of Metro Transit Police Department looking to other agencies to see how we can contract with them for that extension. We are hoping to spend, I mean, we have to spend the $2 million, and it hasn't been a set amount of how much money we have to spend on law enforcement and how much money we need to spend on social services. However, we are continuing to monitor that based on the relationship and the understanding of law enforcement capacity, as well as the proposals we received during this declaration of interest. Did I answer your question?
You did, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, members, how is this coordinated with Chief Morales' work and the nonprofits there? Do those same nonprofits apply, or are they totally different entities? I guess I'm not sure how this is coordinated.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember Pacheco. So the Transit Service Intervention Project was written with two phases in mind, although the phases were launch phases. So the first phase was a 3-week period from beginning of June until late June of outreach events that our HAT team, our Homeless Action Team, coordinated in partnership with social agencies and organizations. Many of the organizations included, county social services, state social services, etc. The second phase of the Transit Service Intervention Project is the increased visibility and law enforcement presence for code of conduct regulation, etc. And that was launched late in June into last week of August. That's how it's written in the legislation. However, the project, the Transit Service Intervention Project, is a year-long project. So we report monthly to the legislature, and we have an end date of June 2024. So we continue to provide outreach events organized by HAT team and our Metro Transit Police Department. On that phase 2, they're coordinating joint efforts with, for example, the University of Minnesota Police Department, Bloomington Police Department, St. Paul Safety and Security Offices, so et cetera. So that part is being coordinated by Captain Grace. Did I answer?
Councilmember Pacheco.
I know it's confusing.
Madam Chair, well, no, the question is, because I'm trying to visualize this, so if I
Yes.
took Lake Street in Hiawatha, for example,
Yes.
would I see our police force or members that they're contracting with Allied at a certain uniform, and the mental health works at a different uniform, and then the mental health works for the county or the city? I'm just trying to visualize that happening, and then if there's something that ends before, and even at our equity committee, there's been a few inquiries by some nonprofits that have been doing the disruptor kind of activities
Yes.
there, and I don't know if they were applied because there's any restriction, or I just like to know, again, if I picture that on Hiawatha and Lake Street, what does it look like with all these different folks there, and how is it coordinated, I guess?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilmember Pacheco, that is a very good question, and that's really the aim of the coordination of the Transit Service Intervention Project, is having multiple agencies coming bi-weekly, talking about how they're increasing visibility on our system, who is where, how are we conducting services, how are we reporting back to the legislation, what are we doing. We do have a lot of neighborhood organized initiatives. Like at Hiawatha, we had a great collaboration with the neighborhood to provide more high visibility on that particular station. Although very aligned with the Transit Service Intervention with HSIP, it has not been part of HSIP yet because we are not, reporting on those. But what you're speaking about is something that we aim to do, which is coordinating and understanding better how all these different initiatives are impacting the safety and the perception of safety on the blue line and green line.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Before I read the proposed action, just want to say the comments, I think echo what some of the council members, very thankful to the legislature for having this money. We aren't a social services agency, so we've struggled with how to do this. I think we were very creative with the creation of the HAT team, but this gives us a whole new way to look at something that we know is happening to people and a way to actually connect with those people and maybe get some of them the help they need. So I just cannot minimize the significance of this. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contracts 23P116 A through E that will provide support to people who are returning to transit while experiencing homelessness, suffering from mental illness, or facing other challenges in an amount not to exceed $766,844 to the following organizations: The Link, Minnesota Community Care, Minnesota Care Partner, Mental Health Minnesota, and We Push for Peace. And with that, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-197.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Vento, seconded by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now we are turning over to the Steve Peterson show, starting with business item 2023-190, which is the release of the 2024 Regional Solicitation and Highway Safety Improvement Program. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, pressure. So I have three items before you here. The first is the 2024 Regional Solicitation and a brief presentation. Get this, there we go. So this has really been 18 months of work to get to an application that we're asking for your approval to release the solicitation for our partners to apply for the regional solicitation. Again, here's the 12 application categories that have been formed and approved by TAB. Some of the key changes, and we came to you last spring that were worked through our committee process. The biggest one was perhaps a refocusing on safety across our transportation system. And so we added number of points to safety, so it's really the highest weighted criterion across the board here when we're evaluating projects. So that was the biggest thing, and then there's a number of other small technical changes, and some of them are shown on the slide. We also did a public comment period, a formal public comment period. Received a lot of really insightful comments, and that also did result in a number of changes, most of those minor or technical in nature. For instance, one was from Hennepin County, asked us to change how we're evaluating bridges, and so that's one change that we did make based on the public comment period. And so the recommended motion before you here, and again, this will be, if approved by the council on September 13th, we'd be looking at a late September release of the application. So there'll be a lot of media material going out to our partners in late September with an application that would be due in mid-December, moving to a selection of next summer. So July, August, it'd be coming back to the council here with a project list for your consideration. So the motion again, Madam Chair, that the Met Council concur with the Transportation Advisory Board action to approve the attached regional solicitation package, including the Highway Safety Improvement Program solicitation for 28 and 2029 funding, and to release the solicitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Vento?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a strange question, but on slide number 2, it talks about the key changes, and I'm interested in the addition of the 100 points to safety-related criteria for most application categories. How do you do that? And in what way are you adding those safety-related criteria? I will tell you that increasingly, as I use mostly my car and limited transit, my biggest anxiety is safety. It's not getting there on time. It's not what are the directions. It's not what is the traffic. It's safety. And the more diverse our thoroughfares get, the more anxious I get. So I'm just curious about how you increase the safety-related criteria.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. So the most of the 12 application categories had an existing measure for safety. For the roadway ones, it's very straightforward. They're looking at the elements that are added from the project and the crash history and kind of combining the two to what the future safety result would be. In bicycle pedestrian, it starts to become a little less quantitative and more qualitative, and that's why we say safety related, because it's the barriers that you're overcoming with a trail bridge or a trail project or sidewalk. And then transit, a similar nature where there's maybe not a direct safety measure, but it's being able to safely get to the transit station, whether it's a sidewalk connection or other safe means. So there's a variety of ways it's incorporated, and I think this next iteration of the solicitation will even look further to enhance that.
Thank you.
And I'll just add a little from been to a bunch of the TPP listening sessions with the counties. This is definitely what we're hearing, is a focus on adding more emphasis on safety. And there's been a lot of discussion in TAB, and it's been not just, it's roads and bridges, and but it's buses and bikes and walking and all of those things. There was really been a strong will kind of around safety-centered themes, and it's figuring out how to apply that across all the categories is sort of the next round of discussions, I would say. Yeah, Councilmember
Madam Chair, I
Benson.
just want to share a safety-related story, and it doesn't apply to transit per se, but it's kind of what's driving my angst about this. I was walking the other day downtown St. Paul, and there was a dad and I'm assuming a child. The son looked about 3 or 4 years old. They came up to the intersection. There was a no walking sign, and the dad started walking, and the little boy pulled him back and said, "Dad, we aren't supposed to go." And the father kind of, I think, wanted to argue with the child, but then between looking at the child and then looking at me, decided not to. And I'm not sure who he was more intimidated. I'm guessing it was the child. But I just hope that all of the work that we do as it relates to this process can kind of follow through with all of us individually being more responsible as it comes to safety. So just had to
Great
share
comments. Additional questions or comments? All right, Mr. Dugan, do you have anything to add about the discussions of TAB?
I'm taking notes on Steve's presentation. Yeah, Councilman Vento, I think the overarching was the safety and security. And then the regional solicitation, there were some changes made to fine tune, some more emphasis on equity. And then safety certainly was given more points. And TAB is very much conscious of that. And I know General Manager Canderas and Chief Morales are equally so. Steve, what do you recall from that discussion? I mean, it was a lot of support for it.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And
I'm sorry.
Mr.
Sorry,
Dugan.
Madam Chair.
No. Yeah, in the TPP, we're hearing about different types of safety. The first action item here was maybe a different form of safety than traditionally we're measuring in the solicitation, but the TPP, we're hearing from different constituents about a lot of different ways of what they think is unsafe about our system, right? And so I think that will continue to be a discussion item we're going to have both with the TPP and then the next iteration of the solicitation.
Yes, and if I may, Madam Chair, the perception is perhaps different. I don't want to say different from reality, but the perception is certainly there. And I make it a point whenever I can to ride, some of the lines that are more affected and observe it for myself. And I was so, if I may, Madam Chair, so thankful to see that gentleman that received the award for his orange line and what he did at the Lake Street Station, because I hate, quality of life issues, they beget, they're not taken care of, they beget more. Trash brings trash. It's just is this obvious? If there's trash in the ground, you don't think, many people don't think more about, it's just like it's becoming on the highways. More people are speeding, so more people are speeding. It just kind of grows on itself. But thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to go on.
No problem. Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, and you're right, perception is part of it, but I will tell you, I probably do 50-50 between transit and driving myself. But people are just blowing by you these days. They're just driving, and I've been on the bus where they've cut off the bus, and it's kind of like, wow. And I was literally on the corner of 35th, and I do most of my driving in the metro area. We have two in cities, actually. But it was on Lyndale and 35th, and it was about 7 in the evening, and I was driving by, and one car was just totally upside down. I mean, and the two cars were next to it. And I was thinking, how fast did they have to be going on Lyndale and 35th to just trash two cars and have the other one on top? So, I mean, but I see it, and I warn the kids that all the time. Stay a little bit further back. Don't walk to the corner. Because they're flying by these days.
All good points, and I would say, as even just representing one of the outer counties, we've got a lot of intersections out there that are still country intersections that are managing urban traffic, and those become very dangerous very quickly. So this conversation about safety is really expansive and covers a lot of different things. So, but I think it was really wise how we at TAB at least looked at weighting more safety into this, and we'll likely do that same as we come up with the next version. All right, any additional questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-190.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Next is business item 2023-191, which is regional solicitation evaluation consulting services. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this comes before you because it does exceed the $500,000 threshold for contracts needing council approval. This is for the really looking forward with a solicitation, and it's a contract with a consulting firm to really, the goal of it is to better integrate the regional development guide and the 2050 TPP into our funding decisions, and doing so really building up the solicitation from the ground level again, making sure all the measures, criteria, and where we're putting our money is reflecting the policies that in the direction that the council and TAB are providing to us and to the region. So that's the main goal of the study. It's going to take the better part of 2.5, 3 years to get there, working with a lot of committees, and the proposed action before you for the consultant study is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 23P 026 with SRF Consulting Group for consulting services, the regional solicitation evaluation in the amount not to exceed $836,207.63. And again, there was a 15% DBE goal that was met by the contractor for this contract. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Just a quick comment. This is so very important that we do this and reevaluate this as we revise the TPP and the 2050 Regional Development Guide, so that all of these things are linked together and really reflect the priorities of the region. So it's very important work. With that, if there's no other questions, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-191.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss, seconded by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries. And back to Steve for business item 2023-192, which is the 2024 through 27 Transportation Improvement Program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last one, I'll turn it over to my colleagues. So we have a lot of the major items that MTS planning does over the course of the years coming before you today. So this is the Transportation Improvement Program. This is a 4-year list of the transportation projects that are funded in part or in whole with federal funding that come through the region. This is one of the key requirements of our role as the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And the TIP, as it's called, does flow into the state's STIP, Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. So there's certain types of projects that are required to be in the TIP before construction takes place. Again, if they have federal funds, so that could be a transit project, or MnDOT puts all of its projects in, whether it's federal funds or not. And then the last category is locally funded projects that meet this threshold of regional significance. So those would be interchange projects, other lane expansion projects, and transitway projects. Our area does extend into Wright and Sherburne counties, so we do have to coordinate with our partners in Wright and Sherburne to make sure that their projects are shown in this document as well, which we've done. Here's the schedule. The final federal approvals are expected, usually it comes in the November, December timeframe from our federal partners. A breakdown of the types of projects you'll see in the tip, so you can see there's a lot of transit money, and a lot of that's the transit-weighted projects that you're very familiar with. And then MnDOT has all of its projects in there, so that's another big chunk of it, and beyond bicycle, pedestrian, and other types of projects. A total of $6.1 billion, so now you're gonna start seeing these tips be bigger with some of the new federal funds and state funds that are coming to the region. You're gonna start seeing $6 billion tips over the 4-year period. Here's we did have a public comment period just for the tip, as we are required to do. We did receive 17 different comments and made some changes based on those comments. A few of those was moving some F-line funds back 2 years. And then MnDOT always sends us a letter as they're always kind of flexing their program forward and backwards and changing what exactly they're doing on projects. So even though small changes do require documentation in our tip. And so MnDOT has a series of changes that you probably saw in the packet. So the proposed action, Madam Chair, before the committee here today it's quite a lengthy one. I'm not going to read it in its entirety, but the main components are shown as adopting the 24 to 27 Transportation Improvement Program, certifying that the Metropolitan planning process is addressing major issues facing the metropolitan area, certifying that the TIP conforms with various federal provisions, consistent with the Transportation Policy Plan, meets applicable federal requirements, adequate opportunity for public involvement. And we transmit these comments to some of our partners, including the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-192.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Steve. All right, next we are on to, we're shifting to the Dave Burns Show. So business item 2023-193, which is the smooth urban area boundary. Welcome.
Great, thank you very much. Dave Burns with the Met Council Planning Department, Planning Analyst. And I am here to talk about another kind of core MPO function, the urban area boundary or urbanized area boundary. So the urban area boundaries are updated by the U.S. Census Bureau every 10 years after the decennial census. So what we have is the urban boundaries undergo sort of a smoothing process. The areas are originally identified by the Census Bureau, and then we as the MPO smooth that out to kind of adjust it to be logical and include roadway, rights of way, water features, municipal boundaries, etc. So basically the smooth area boundary must include all of those identified areas. It can't shrink, it can only expand. And as I mentioned, this is for urban areas within an MPO. The MPO does lead this process. So really the purpose of the urban area boundary, it affects a number of federal transportation programs, but primarily it's used to determine the Metropolitan Planning Area or MPA boundary. So the MPA boundary is really the MPO's sphere of responsibility and influence for transportation planning and programming. That said, the Met Council is a little bit distinct here. By state law, our MPA boundary must include all of the 7 counties. This really means that the urban and rural distinction and subsequent urban area boundary for areas within the 7 counties is not of great importance. And the urban area boundary does extend two portions of urban, or of Wright and Sherburne counties. That happened in the previous smoothing process 10 years ago, and it continues to expand outward. Just a little note here, in our MPO work, we have not found anything of significance where the smoothed urban area boundary really has much of an effect. MnDOT does, however, use the urban area boundary really just to calculate and define between urban and rural mileage as required by FHWA. And some federal competitive funding programs do distinguish between urban and rural roadways for certain funding applications. So map time. Here we have in that sort of salmon colored, the census identified urban area boundary. That green is the smooth urban area boundary. And then there should be a red border around the entirety of the urban area boundary. Here are some differences from the previous urban area boundary, or our current urban area boundary, and the draft urban area boundary. That's dark purple was added to the urban area boundary. The hatch pattern was removed from the urban area boundary. And then, yeah, the result is that that yellow line, which is the proposed urban area boundary. A couple of notable changes. Stillwater Township, Baytown Township, Oak Park Heights, they are now their own urban areas. Wisconsin is completely out of our metropolitan planning area. Lake Elmo was split between sort of the Minneapolis-St. Paul urban area and the Stillwater urban area. All of Rosemount is now in the urban area. Maple Plain, Now Then, and Oak Grove are now outside of the urban area and are classified as rural. St. Francis barely made the threshold, and it's, again, is now its own urban area. And there were some minor changes to Wright and Sherburne counties, mainly to include interchanges. So with that, here's a timeline, and we are looking for approval of the smoothed urban area boundary.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council members?
I was just wondering, what is the tie-in of funding once the smooth area goes into effect?
Great, thank you, and thank you for the question. There's not really a tie-in for funding. This is by law, our metropolitan planning area does include the 7 counties, so nothing really changes in that regard. This is kind of an administrative change. It doesn't have a huge effect unless it's outside of the urban area boundary, and we do have like a separate memorandum of understanding for Wright and Sherburne counties, so it should have no effect on funding.
Councilmember Chambliss.
And I had pretty much the same question, but I want to make sure I'm understanding. So if it's outside of the smoothed urban area boundary based off the 2010 census, then it's still part of the 7 county?
Yep.
Okay.
Just more smooth.
I know the term smooth.
This is one of the ways our MPO is a little unique.
Yeah, it's really important for other MPOs. For our MPO, it's not quite as important.
All right, any additional questions or comments? All right, then the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council adopt the proposed smoothed urban area boundary as shown on the attached maps. I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-193.
So move.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. And back to Dave for business item 2023-194.
Great, thank you. I have to, oh, sorry, okay.
It's coming.
Okay, so I am going to talk about the Transportation Policy Plan Amendment Number 2. So the TPP contains what we call a current revenue scenario, which is the fiscally constrained list of major projects for the region by 2040. So projects that are deemed regionally significant must be identified in the TPP and included in the TIP to begin construction. So a TPP amendment is required whenever a new interchange or capacity addition on the principal arterial system takes place. In this TPP amendment, we have a total of 5 projects that fit this criterion. And so a total of 5 projects will be included in this amendment. So because of this, we examine their consistency with our established TPP goals, objectives, and strategies, the impact on funding, and impact on performance measures and environmental justice areas. So projects can begin construction after being in both the TIP and the TPP. So in during the last legislative session, Governor Walz announced the projects that will be receive funding from the Corridors of Commerce program. So 4 of the 5 projects in this TPP amendment are part of, will receive the Corridors of Commerce awards, a total of $212 million in all of Corridors of Commerce funding. To talk briefly about these projects, the US 10 between CASA 9 and CASA 78 project, it's approximately 3 miles in Coon Rapids. And this is an expansion project by adding a travel lane in both directions from Hanson Boulevard to Round Lake Boulevard. And it will help alleviate congestion to 2 of the major commercial and industrial hubs in the city of Coon Rapids. Project number 2 is what we kind of like to call the candy store interchange. This is roughly 2.5 miles southwest of the city of Jordan, and it converts an at-grade intersection to a grade-separated interchange. So this really serves as an important freight and mobility connection and helps mitigate safety concerns. This is funded with county local option sales tax funds. The big project is the I-94 project from Albertville to Monticello. This really kind of fills the gap that exists between Monticello and Albertville along I-94, expands it to 6 lanes in total, so 1 in each direction, 1 additional lane. Rehabs the pavement and also includes a bridge replacement of nearby cross streets. The Minnesota 65 and 117th Avenue interchange project in Blaine. This is part of a larger project along Highway 65. So 4 total intersections will be converted to grade-separated interchanges. So this corridor has a significant safety problem, and this project will help to alleviate that safety problem. It's going to significantly improve biking and walking conditions, which are quite poor along this corridor, reduce travel time and congestion, and also reduce conflict points, which really helps to increase safety. And the Minnesota 13 grade separation in Savage and Burnsville. This includes the kind of project extent is Quinton Avenue to Nicollet Avenue. It proposes grade separations at Quinton Avenue, Lynn Avenue, Chowan Avenue, and Washburn Avenue, and a realignment of the south frontage road, construction of a new north to south frontage road. The goal here is to reduce congestion, improve traffic flow, improve safety, and allow greater accessibility to the Port of Savage, which is a major freight port for the state of Minnesota. So all projects are fully funded. This does align with our 2040 Transportation Policy Plan goals, and project sponsors have documented support. These are pretty far along in the process. We will also, as part of this, release these for public comment as part of the TPP amendment. In terms of schedule, we are actually looking for recommendation to release the draft TPP Amendment 2 for public review and comments. And then after that 45-day comment period, we will bring this back to the committee and the council for final approval. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Just a brief comment. I know it's going up for public comment, but when we were talking earlier about some of these safety projects, I can speak to two of these because they are, well, I guess the Savage one isn't in my district anymore, but had been for 8 years. And that is such a high freight corridor that it gets very dangerous with the trucks trying to get in and out of the ports of Savage. So it's a really big deal. And definitely down by the candy store is a big deal. That is one of those scary intersections you have to dodge across to get through. But, pending that, I would invite anyone down to Minnesota's largest, greatest candy store. But also, little secret, it used to be part of an apple orchard. So if you go there and there's a light on in front of the building and making apple pies, and there's some of the best apple pies in the metro. So come on down and you can see the intersection for yourself. All right, any additional questions or comments? All right, then seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-194.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. With that, we are done with our business for the evening. I think the first item on the transit service intervention project should go non-consent to the full council because I think our council would like to learn about it. The regional solicitation and HSIP should probably go non-consent. The third one for the consulting on regional solicitation can go consent. The TIP can go non-consent. Same thing with the smooth urban area boundary. And can the last one go?
Non-consent or on-consent? For 4 and 5.
Okay, 4 is on consent. Sorry, I had my notes wrong. Thank you. And consent also for smooth area boundary. And what about the last?
Non-consent.
And that's the last one can go non-consent. Everyone agree?
Yep.
You get that? Here's my cheat sheet. All right. And you'll get to listen to me talk a lot on the 13th. All right. Now we are on to our information items. So the first is our transit asset management update. We have Kristen Thompson. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristen Thompson. I'm the Director of Asset Management. My pronouns are she, her, and you can call me Kristen. I'm here today to just provide an update and an overview about our transit asset management program at Metro Transit. I'm relatively new in this role. I've been doing this for about a year now, and we've been making some exciting progress, and we thought it was a good time to come and share with you all. So before I dive into our work, I wanted to ground everybody in a little bit of Asset Management 101. So I always like to start with this definition, which comes to us from the FTA, because it really kind of breaks down the elements of asset management in a digestible way. So for starters, it's a strategic and systemic practice, which means it's not just one project, it's not just one plan, it's a part of our business processes that we are working to implement every day. And it relates to many parts of our business, as you see in the second bullet point, from procurement, operation, maintenance, and ultimately disposal of our transit assets. So it really covers the full life cycle. And the reason for that is because we want to manage performance, risk, and cost of those assets over their life cycle. So it's really taking kind of a wide view. Ultimately, that last bullet is to provide safe, cost-effective, and reliable public transit service, which of course is pretty much our mission here at Metro Transit. So it really, this FTA definition really kind of aligns with our mission at Metro Transit. Taking one step back even further is, what do we even mean by an asset? The dictionary definition is it's an item or thing or entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. What I show on the right here is a non-exhaustive list of transit assets using FTA categories. Basically everything of value that we need to make the system run and provide service to our riders. The idea here is that we are holistically managing our system of assets in order to make decisions across the different groups of assets. Some outcomes of asset management when we're doing it well can be improved customer service because we're able to deliver our transit service reliably. We have well-maintained vehicles, facilities, and infrastructure that the public can see and experience every day. We can improve productivity, reduce our costs because we're able to do maintenance based on the condition of the assets and through practices like preventive and predictive maintenance. It also helps us to optimize our resource allocation by aligning our spending with our goals and objectives, incorporating life cycle cost considerations into our decision-making, for example. And lastly, we can improve our stakeholder communications. Using asset data and plans, it helps us to communicate our needs and objectives to you all policymakers, to our partners, to the community. So how do we achieve these outcomes? It really requires a lot of collaboration and integration of business processes across the organization. Virtually every work unit at Metro Transit has a connection to asset management in some way, shape, or form. This model comes to us again from the FTA. They have a lot of great information about asset management out there that we can work from. I think of this as sort of the three pillars that you see. Our policy and strategy, which represents the organizational commitment, defining roles and responsibilities, defining goals and objectives, really kind of the leadership piece of asset management. In the central column, we have lifecycle management, which is what you would think of as sort of traditional asset owning department responsibilities, from the procurement to the care of the asset over its life cycle to its disposal, understanding what we have, what condition it's in, how best to take care of it. And then the third pillar is cross-asset planning, so things like planning, budgeting, performance modeling that we want to be able to look at across different asset classes and compare and evaluate together fit in that third pillar. These pillars of work are kind of underpinned by supporting functions. First of these is information technology systems. You can probably gather we have thousands of assets that we use to deliver our service every day, so it's really important to have a robust technology system that can help us to track the data that we need about those assets and help us to turn that data into insights that we need to make decisions. Another underpinning here are what the FTA calls enablers. Things like training, culture, leadership, project management help us to coordinate the work sort of across the organization. Asset management as sort of a discipline for infrastructure is relatively new. It was first developed in Australia in the 1980s and 90s around water infrastructure. So it really kind of was forming at the intersection of engineering, capital planning, and maintenance. As the field developed, international standards were developed. So the current one is the ISO 55000 standard. The FTA has an interest in asset management because of its funding role, of course, for infrastructure and vehicles. So they began to develop guidance so that the overall condition of the entire nation's transit system could be tracked in sort of a consistent way and the investments targeted. So this led to rulemaking in 2016, which we follow today. Metro Transit's approach to asset management has evolved kind of with the industry overall. We have, of course, always cared for our assets and maintained them, maybe not called it asset management at the time. And then as this FTA rulemaking came out prior to 2022, asset management was sort of distributed within the organization. Han Tran, who's in the room today from finance, coordinated our first two TAM plans in 2018 and 2022. I was brought on board last year as part of the first effort to build sort of a dedicated team for asset management, to expand our capacity, to provide tools, support process improvement, and promote coordination and consistency. So currently, we're a small team of 4, and we report to the Chief Operating Officer. We're planning to add more staff as we need to support the agency needs as they grow. So we are grounded in the FTA requirements for transit asset management. The first of these is a TAM plan, which I mentioned, which is submitted every 4 years. Agencies like ours, because of our fleet size and the fact that we're multimodal, have more complex requirements in the TAM plan. Those requirements are listed there on the left. These may look familiar to you because the TAM plan has been brought to the council or to the Transportation Committee as an info item in the past. So you may have seen this plan before. The annual NTD reporting represents how we implement the plan. So that includes sort of reporting back on some of the elements within the plan, such as inventory, condition assessments, how we're meeting our targets. And that is annual reporting. So FTA requirements aside, why is asset management so important? Unfortunately, headlines like this are not that uncommon, especially if you follow transit news, because our industry relies on assets to deliver on our mission. The challenges can be very high profile. This is by no means an effort to point fingers at our colleagues. In a complex operation, difficult situations can occur despite everybody's good intentions and good work. The point here is really that a robust asset management practice can help us to get ahead of these issues, prevent emergencies rather than having to deal with them as they come. Beyond the headlines and avoiding them, asset management is becoming increasingly important as we build out our system. With this Metro vision, our system is growing rapidly and at a sort of an accelerating rate, so it's really important that we have a really solid handle on the assets that we have now and that we're building so that we can care for them and deliver the service that the region expects. So you see here with the full vision build out, we'll be tripling the number of BRT stations we have, almost doubling LRT stations and miles of track and infrastructure, and significantly adding to our fleet. So we really want to be able to care for the system that we have now as well as the system that we're building into the future, and building up our asset management practice will help us to do that and kind of meet those expectations. An important philosophy of asset management is the idea of continuous improvement. So learning from our experience to apply those lessons forward. So I'd like to highlight some asset management successes that we've already seen at Metro Transit. Some of these predate my involvement in the program, so I want to recognize the efforts of, this isn't my work, this is Metro Transit's work, recognize the efforts of my colleagues. The first of these here is our LRT State of Good Repair program. The idea with this is to identify and replace key components that are becoming obsolete. And this proactive replacement can help mitigate any risk that we have to our operations. That helps to prevent us from becoming one of the headlines that I showed a few slides ago if we're getting kind of ahead of potential issues. These projects are coordinated really closely across the agency. Engineering and facilities and our rail systems team are really at the core of things. And they first try to avoid impacts to operations by doing projects at night or using creative approaches to keep service running, potentially on a single track. If a shutdown is required, then that coordination grows because then bus operations and transit information and other customer-facing teams are involved to help coordinate a shutdown and provide service continuity to our riders. If a shutdown does become required, then these planned shutdowns help us to prepare for a better customer experience with replacement service, signage, information, and so on. We also try to make the most of a shutdown to do as much work as possible and have many different related projects kind of happening at once if the system is shut down. Another program that will be familiar to some of you on the committee is the light rail vehicle rust mitigation program. Light rail vehicles in our climate experience rust and corrosion due to the interaction with salt and sand in the roadways. So we learned after 10 years in service that corrosion on our older vehicles was really severe and needed labor-intensive repair, which ultimately resulted in the need to contract out that service. So learning from that experience, our LRV maintenance team has identified new inspection tasks so that the affected areas can be identified earlier and addressed on an ongoing basis so that it's more manageable. These lessons are already being applied on our newer vehicles, even while those repairs are being done on the older fleet. An example from our bus side is Metro BRT fleet management. We learned early in A-line implementation that the dedicated BRT fleet would accumulate really high mileage due to the service design with long hours and frequent service. So initially we mitigated that by adding more spare buses to the fleet. But as the midlife for the initial A-line buses approached, a plan was developed to explore some adjustments to the usual midlife maintenance practices that we would normally use for buses. So the 12 A-line buses from 2015, all of them received standard midlife body updates and interior assessments and repairs, but they divided those buses into 4 groups and are testing different approaches to the mechanical components and how we update those at midlife. So the results of that test will then be evaluated and applied to use on future BRT midlife updates coming in up this decade. So a great example of kind of testing different strategies and then learning from that to adjust for the future. Speaking of the future, looking ahead, the sales tax funding approved this year really puts us in a strong position to deliver on our mission and take care of the assets that we have and that we're building. The new funding creates specific expenditures for capital maintenance for the metro system. Of course, that is paired with high expectations for reliable, well-maintained systems, so growing our capabilities around asset management will really help to support all those efforts and help us put the funding where it's most needed to deliver the benefit. So I mentioned I've been on board here for about a year now, so I want to share some of the initial areas of focus for my team and progress there. One area is on asset management, learning, and collaboration. This is really about investing in both in the specific asset management team, but the broader workforce at Metro Transit to make sure everyone has the information and the training that they need to do this work. So we have an internal steering team for asset management, as well as cross-functional project teams for all of our initiatives. We engage with our peers and industry groups quite extensively. We've also been plugging into the capital planning process and supporting long-term projections for different kind of systems of assets. There's been a standing practice of doing this already for the rail system, but we're kind of building out, looking at other systems that would benefit from a long-term outlook. So BRT is the next one that we're working on. And this really helps to support CIP development. If you already know what you need, 30 years out, you can kind of work backwards and kind of as the timeline grows closer, that comes into focus as terms of what needs to be put into the CIP. Another very large area of focus for us is data and technology. We have the current technology tools for managing our assets are past their useful life and really not meeting the needs of the organization, particularly as we grow. So we are working on a new council-wide enterprise asset management system, which is part of the BPSI program, Business Process System Integration Program. And so that project is a partnership with ES. We're co-sponsoring it, and then we are working with other divisions across the council. So updates for that project do go to the management committee because of the enterprise nature of it, but I wanted you to just be aware that that's a major focus. In preparation for that new system, we're also kind of strengthening the data sources that we already have, so we're ready to plug them in and go. So one example of this is building out our GIS program for asset-related data, making sure we have very complete, robust data processes that people can count on, that it's going to get into the system and usable to everybody at Metro Transit who may need it. We've also been working on process improvements through our collaborative approach across work groups to really learn about the challenges that folks are having, what the pinch points are, and develop solutions, provide kind of an internal consulting resource for that. So process improvements, one example of that is onboarding practices for new assets. It's traditionally been, it can be a bumpy handoff when you're working with multiple work groups and going from, design to construction to using the assets. So we're pioneering this on the North Loop Garage, and we'll be working to, as we learn from how well those changes go, applying them for other assets in our system. So those are just a couple examples of the work that we have been doing recently and the look ahead. I'm really excited about the progress we've been able to make so far, and then as our team's capacity grows, we're hoping to build on those successes and support the organization as it grows. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is fascinating. I really appreciate this presentation. I'm curious as to any guidance the FTA has provided with regard to climate extremes that are occurring, and certainly occurring throughout the country, but for us, it's both the combination of the heat and that white stuff that was in one of those earlier photos.
Yeah. That's a Chair and Council Member, that's a great question. I think there's a growing awareness in the asset management community about the intersections with climate resilience, sustainability. As far as I know, there's not been specific asset management guidance from the FTA on that front, but there's a lot of sort of discussions and coordination happening within the industry.
Thank you.
All right, additional questions or comments? I would just say, I think especially with the all of the capital maintenance coming over to us and new funding sources for all of this robust planning that's going on is going to really dovetail really well with that, where, I've always said that, planning and good planning behind things is really supports the decisions we're making, and this is the kind of information that will really inform how we do that and do that well and figure out what that really means to the organization over a long time. So thank you. I appreciate the update.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
All right. If there's no other questions, then we'll move to our final information item. It's the Transportation System Performance Evaluation. We have Liz Roten here. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. My name is Liz Roten. I'm a data scientist in Metropolitan Transportation Services. I also do some work in community development. Robert Street. So today I have essentially a show and tell. We recently completed the Transportation System Performance Evaluation, which is a comprehensive review of the entire transportation system. We are required by state law to complete a TSPE before every transportation policy plan, TPP update, and here it is. It contains data from a variety of sources, including demographic context from the US Census, nationwide data sources that allow us to compare our region to peer regions, as well as data from our own travel behavior inventory. So in this presentation, I'm going to give a brief tour with a few selected charts and plots, but the TSPE itself is filled with so much more information, and I really encourage you to check it out. So this document is published on the Met Council website. And new in this cycle, we've really focused on making the document web accessible and kind of web native first. So all of the plots and maps that you see in the document are interactive. There are over 98 interactive charts and maps, as well as over 100 tables and 60 distinct data sources. And on the back end, behind everything that you see, we have improved our data management practices, and we took the time to build clear, reproducible workflows and analyses. So when we update the data behind this document, it should be relatively smooth. And though the document is web native, we do have a static PDF version available upon request. So the TSPE is organized by current TPP goal and objectives. This is a screenshot of the front opening page. You see on the far left, there is a bar to search by various keywords, and it's organized by TPP goal and sub-objective. Within each objective, all of the content is organized into sections. So this section, for example, displays data from MnDOT's Omnibus survey showing how perceptions of safety while walking have changed over time. The first bit highlighted is context, which is written by our planners that puts all of the data into context with what we know about our region and trends over time. All of the plots and charts are interactive. So in this instance, when you hover your mouse over the plots, you'll get a little tooltip, generally in a sentence form, that gives you more detail on the exact numbers that you are seeing. And over in the far right, there is a navigation pane where you can navigate within the objective. So this presentation is going to follow the order of the current TPP. So it means that we're going to be going through the TPP goals linearly, but we aren't going to be going through much of any of the content linearly. So we're going to be jumping around from different modes, different time periods, and also between different types of comparisons. And that's intentional for this presentation. So we've chosen only a handful of these, and again, I really encourage you to flip through and see what piques your interest. So where this moment stands in the pandemic era is really inescapable. In early 2023, we have some measures that we use the most recent data whenever possible and as readily as possible. But some of the most recent data is 2019 for some measures, and that's 4 years ago now. And in many cases, this is a result of the data schedules of like the American Community Survey and national data sources. So it's exactly what we have is useful information, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the pandemic in all cases and exactly how trends are going forward. Okay. So the first goal, is system stewardship, which involves efficiently preserving and maintaining the transportation system, as well as operating it efficiently and cost effectively. This chart here shows the total pavement for interstates and national highway system roads, both in the metro area and statewide, that is in poor condition. So in 2021, a little over 1% of Twin Cities national interstate and national highway roads were in poor condition, whereas statewide that number is closer to about 0.6%. Throughout the entire TSPE, we've made sure to visually make the Twin Cities or our region stand out. So here the Twin Cities is in red and the statewide comparison is in gray. So hopefully throughout the whole thing, the data that's about our region will pop out a bit more. We can also map this measure to see where on the principal arterial systems we have good, fair, and poor pavement distributed, as well as over time. You can select 2017, 18, 19, 20, or 2021 and see how the condition of the roads changes over time. And because this is an interactive map, you can zoom in closer on specific areas, as well as click on any of the segments, and that will give you more detailed information about that segment. So within operating the transportation system efficiently and cost effectively, one example is transit productivity. There are a variety of measures of transit productivity, and the one I'm showing here today is unlinked trips per revenue hour. There was a major decline in 2020, and in what you're seeing here, the Twin Cities is in the dark blue, and all of the peer regions are in the lighter blue. So for the most part, we mirror national trends and as compared to other peer regions. The next section is safety and security. First, to reduce the transportation system's vulnerability, and second, to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes and improve safety. This plot shows annual precipitation in Minnesota with the 1895 to 2021 trend and average lines. And the council has done a lot of various work on the impact of climate change on our region and planning and transportation. And we didn't attempt to reinvent the wheel with the TSPE. We really have gathered all of those sources together and provided links to them. So you could go from the TSPE and use it more as a resource guide. We also have information on topics like extreme heat and localized flooding. The next objective is to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes and improve safety and security. So we publish measures related to pedestrian and transit safety, as well as at-grade rail crossings, data on crashes causing fatalities and serious injuries, and the rates of these crashes. So in this chart, we see the statewide and metro crash rate over time. The Twin Cities is in red and Minnesota is in gray. The next section is access to destinations, which includes increase the number and share of trips taken using carpool, transit, bike, and walk, and to improve the availability and quality of multimodal travel. So this plot is using data from the Met Council Travel Behavior Inventory. And here it shows the percentage of trips that are made by walking and how this has changed, how this changes by community type within the region. So there was a significant increase in walking trips between 2019 in dark blue and 2021 in orange. And that's uniform across most Thrive designations, with only the emerging suburban edge reducing its percentage. Again, from our travel behavior inventory, this is the modal participation rate. So it measures the proportion of people in the region who take a particular mode even once. So for example, in 2019, about 5.7% of adults took transit on a typical day. We also have asked about trip replacement behavior. So this plot is looking at the percentage of adults who engage in a given trip replacement behavior on a typical weekday in 2019 versus in 2021. So between 2019 in the dark blue and the 2021 in orange, there was a significant change in the number of people who would stay home all day, work from home 6 or more hours of the day, receive packages at home, or get a delivery of food. Okay. Another measure in this objective is transit ridership. So total transit ridership has decreased steadily between 2015 to 2019, and about 1.8% annually. There was a dramatic drop in 2020 with the start of the pandemic, and in 2021, across the region, we're at about 42% of 2019 levels. Another measure is the daily delay per commuter. And this is a plot showing the number of minutes of delay during peak hours that an auto commuter might experience in minutes per person per day. The Twin Cities is in dark blue, whereas the peer regions are in the lighter blue. And we see that the delay trends in the region have mirrored those of our peers generally, but that we are consistently higher than places like Cincinnati and Milwaukee and lower than Denver and Dallas. We can also look at reliability and travel time on easy pass lanes as compared to general purpose lanes. So the region builds easy pass lanes to provide a reliable travel option, and we can see how effective it is here. In the blue line at the very bottom of the chart is the travel time variability on a typical weekday morning. You can see the variability is relatively low. The amount of time it takes to travel a certain amount of distance is pretty stable from day to day, whereas the gray area is the range of travel time in the general purpose lanes. So whereas if you're in the easy pass lane, you can expect that your travel time will be around 13 minutes, no matter what time of the morning you go. In the general purpose lanes, that can vary much more widely. Okay. Next is competitive economy, which includes investing in a multimodal transportation system and improving multimodal access to regional jobs. Part of competitive economy is to invest in multimodal transportation, and providing residents and businesses with safe and reliable multimodal travel options other than driving is one way to improve quality of life. And in this section, we use National Travel Survey data to compare the travel choices people make in other peer regions with the Twin Cities. The transportation decisions that people make are in many ways shaped by the systems that are available to them. A higher or lower proportion of trips made by non-auto mode is indicative of a system that is more or less supportive of that mode. We generally are in the middle of the pack, but we are higher in the proportion of commuters who bike to work than many other peer metros. Another interesting point of this plot is looking at the increase in work from home from 2006 to 2019. This data only goes to 2019, so we're before the pandemic. So working from home frequency has increased even before people worked at home more. So the previous analysis looked at just commuting, whereas this one looks at total travel. The Twin Cities region is, again, around the middle, and in this instance, it's ordered by the percentage of all travel that's made by non-auto commutes. So places like New York and Boston are, of course, relatively high, but in the number of trips that are made by not cars. But we become higher than places like Atlanta, Detroit, Phoenix for trips made by non-auto. Next, we also have improving multimodal access to regional job concentrations. We measure this by looking at accessibility to jobs by different modes. In this instance, we're looking at the number of jobs available within 30 minutes by car. The Twin Cities region ranks third among the 24 peer highway regions for accessibility by auto, exceeded only by Los Angeles and San Jose. So what the chart is saying is in 2016, the typical worker had access to about 741,000 jobs within 30 minutes by car in the Twin Cities. Okay. Next goal is healthy and equitable communities. This includes reducing transportation-related air emissions and increasing the availability and attractiveness of multimodal travel. First, we'll look at air quality as it is compared to federal standards. So for each transportation-related air pollutant, including carbon monoxide, fine particles, ozone, we measure the maximum value as a percentage of the federal standard. So anywhere where we're below the 100% line means that we are under the federal standard, whereas anywhere we're above that line indicates that we exceed that standard. And this plot shows a really great success story in recent years of reducing the amount of sulfur dioxide, whereas things like ozone and fine particles are not quite as strong. Of course, we expect that the EPA is going to update these standards, and when they do, we'll be able to update this chart as well. Next, we're looking at vehicle miles traveled, which are a key predictor of greenhouse gases. Vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, per person remains stable at approximately 25.5 vehicle miles traveled per person per day from 2010 to 2019. In 2020, it fell to about 20 VMT per person per day, but 2021 saw a rebound in that. If we combine the effects of VMT and changing fuel efficiencies, we can see total fuel consumption. This is looking at the statewide total consumption of gasoline. In the short term, it more closely follows the VMT trends, but in the longer term, changes in fuel efficiency in the vehicle fleet also matter. And this measure is important given the importance of transportation finance in fuel taxes in federal and state transportation funding. We also see that registrations of electric vehicles have increased dramatically in just the past few years. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles have grown 48% from 2018 to 2022, and battery electric vehicles have grown 241% in that same time period. Increasing the availability of transit across the region, particularly in high-frequency transit, is one way to support active transportation across the whole region. So here we're assessing the transit availability in the region as both the amount of geographic area within a 10-minute walk and the share of the population within a 10-minute walk of transit by service type. So this plot shows the percentage of the regional population that has access to each transit type, either any transit or high-frequency transit. In 2022, about 15% of the region's population lived in the small slice of the area served by high-frequency transit. The last section is guiding land use. So encourage land use design that integrates highways, streets, transit, walk, and bike. This plot is based on an analysis from April of 2021, where council staff reviewed 66 completed comprehensive plans and assessed each of them for where transit, if it is referenced at all, is referenced within that comprehensive plan. Communities vary in the degree to which they considered transit in their comprehensive plans. Slightly less than half pursued opportunities beyond transit ways, or they referenced transit ways that were included in their increased revenue. Finally, the very last section of the TSPE is the appendix. There are many tables, including supplementary plots, tables, maps, links to resources and other agencies like MnDOT, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and federal agencies, definitions and acronyms, as well as references and links to raw data sources. And finally, one of the most useful maps I've found is in the appendix, and it shows the geographic boundaries of different definitions of our region. So the 7-county metro is the darkest because it's always in every definition of our region, whereas the metropolitan planning area has a little bit more reach. The 9-county, of course, includes 2 more counties, and the core-based, the CBSA, is the most expansive that goes further north and even into parts of Wisconsin. It's useful, particularly for my family members when they ask, who do you work for again? So that's our walkthrough of the TSPE. And also in every slide throughout this presentation, the small link in the bottom left corner available now is a link directly to that plot and section within the document. So if you want to see that exact plot, you can click on that link. And I am happy to take any questions.
Good, thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. This was really interesting. And very impressive that you did this presentation without notes. So I didn't see you looking at your laptop that much. I just did have a question about on page 25 and 26, the vehicle miles traveled. Was that just residential or did it include commercial travel?
This is looking at all vehicle miles traveled. And this data is coming from MnDOT, and they have a very particular way of calculating VMT, which is looking at all of the highway miles and looking at all of the cars that are traveling on those miles. There are different ways to measure VMT, but the MnDOT method is most consistent, stable, and is broadly the most useful. So it's any vehicle that's on the road.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking is because we might see a significant difference if we disaggregated it out between commercial and residential usage.
Right.
Particularly when it comes to gas consumption on the next page and pollution. Because I know that more of the pollution is happening with commercial than residential, but when we see graphs like this, it gives a different perception, and I think a lot of folks think that most of the pollution should be directed at residential consumers. So, but it's a MnDOT graphic, so.
Yes, Madam Chair, Member Chambliss. It is a MnDOT measure. We also have calculated vehicle miles traveled from the travel behavior inventory. The TBI is a person level sample, so we have much more detailed information about the kind of trip that they're making and the mode that they're traveling on. And so we do actually have a walking miles traveled and biking miles traveled in the TSPE.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Yeah, Madam Chair. The data you have here, particularly about mileage and usage and the like, do you also then use this for our previous presentation on when you should maintain a vehicle or how many miles they're going to be running before you need to do that?
Madam Chair, Member Pacheco, can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I'm just wondering because we have great data on the usage and how many miles and these vehicles are driven, and then within our own vehicles, are we using that same data to determine when maintenance should be held, or how long that one of our buses would be on the road before we did something different?
Madam Chair, I
See
believe
Jonathan sneaking up on you.
Madam Chair, Member Pacheco. This data is vehicle miles traveled for all vehicles, commercial vehicles as well as personal vehicles. Metro Transit also has data on their individual vehicles, which is calculated for the transit fleet, and that's a different order of magnitude bias. But we don't have individual vehicle data. This is for the entire fleet of privately owned and commercially owned vehicles. So we don't use this for owners of fleets, including Metro Transit, use their individual vehicle data for maintenance as all consumers do. But this is looking at the total amount of travel that's occurring in the region.
Okay, additional questions? I always ask super easy questions, so I have a question. Some of these things, when I look at some of these measures, like even the comprehensive plans or even the high frequency transit, the share of population within 10-minute walk of transit, as you know, the metropolitan region has a lot of different types of communities, including a whole lot of rural and ag land. And so, some of that, like with some of even the small cities, I'd love to see even the comp plan data kind of broken up by land use, just because, like you might look at something like VMT, and one of my cities that I represent lost a grocery store during COVID, so they have to drive 10, 15 miles to be able to get to groceries. So there's a reason, and there's a VMT tied to it, but they might have a focus more on their accessibility to that in their comp plan than they do to local transit. And so, having some context with some of these measures around land use would be really interesting, especially as we're going into the 2050 plan, because those things are so linked together. And I think that some of these measures might look quite a bit different, just kind of really to your point of commercial versus personal. And that would be really interesting, I think, to see.
Madam Chair, that's a great question, and you're going to be pleased that we're working on a very deep dive on VMT right now, including who is producing the most VMT, what percentage of VMT is produced by what people, looking at by land use, looking at it by demographics, age, household type. We're going to be publishing that hopefully in the next month or so, and we'll be bringing that to you later in the fall.
Great. All right, any additional questions or comments? Well, thank you. That was very, very interesting. So appreciate it. Any final words from council members? I'll just say congratulations to the Metro Transit Police Department that just celebrated their 30th anniversary, and thanks to the council members who were able to attend. If there is nothing else, then we can be adjourned.